In a small Texas town where the summer heat shimmers off tin roofs, Tom Miller notices an elderly widow's house leaking during a thunderstorm. Without hesitation, he grabs his toolbox and spare shingles from his beat-up truck. While other contractors quoted thousands, Tom simply climbs up and fixes her roof, refusing payment from the gentle woman who reminds him of his late mother. She thanks him with homemade sweet tea and stories of simpler times, never once hinting at her true identity. When a convoy of black trucks arrives at Tom's modest home days later, his world turns upside down. The widow owns America's largest ranch, and she sees in Tom something rare in today's world: genuine kindness. What could this chance encounter mean for a simple handyman's future? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn breaks over Tom Miller's workshop, a converted garage that smells of sawdust and honest labor. His father's toolbox, weathered red metal with Miller & Son hand-painted in fading white letters, sits open on the workbench. The morning light catches the worn handles of chisels, hammers, and screwdrivers, each tool telling its own story of homes fixed and problems solved over 3 decades. Tom runs his calloused hand over the toolbox's dented lid, remembering the day his father first taught him to hold a hammer. "It's not just about fixing things, son," James Miller had said, his voice gravelly but gentle. "It's about fixing them right and treating folks right while you're at it." At 58, Tom's hands bear the same workman's callous as his father's, earned through years of honest labor in their small Texas town. His workshop calendar is filled with penciled-in appointments: Mrs. Henderson's stuck window, old Mr. Peterson's squeaky porch steps, the elementary school's wonky basketball hoop. The jobs rarely pay much, but that was never the point. Living alone in the modest house his parents left him, Tom finds purpose in being the person others call when things go wrong. His rates haven't changed in 15 years, and half the time he works for whatever folks can afford. Sometimes that means fresh-baked cookies from the Henderson sisters or homegrown tomatoes from Mr. Peterson's garden. The morning sun warms his back as he loads his trusted Ford F-150. The blue paint faded, but the engine still purring like the day his father bought it. The truck's bed carries the essential tools of his trade: lumber salvaged from good projects to help with smaller ones, a collection of shingles in various shades, you never know when they'll come in handy, and his grandfather's leather tool. In belt, its pouches shaped by 3 generations of use. Sarah at the local diner waves as he drives past, holding up a coffee cup in their morning ritual. He'll stop by later, help her fix that stubborn screen door she's been meaning to mention. The town's changed over the years: empty storefronts where family businesses once thrived, younger folks moving to the big cities, but the heart of the community beats on in small kindnesses and remembered favors. A weather-beaten sign reading "Miller's Handyman Services, no job too small," hangs from his truck's side, the phone number his father painted decades ago still clearly visible. Some folks in town joke that Tom's the last of a dying breed, but he doesn't see it that way. He's just a man doing what his father taught him, fixing what's broken, helping where he can, and charging what's fair. The morning stretches ahead, filled with the kind of work that keeps a small town running, the quiet, necessary tasks that don't make headlines, but make life a little better for everyone. Tom checks his notebook, the pages filled with his neat handwriting detailing measurements, materials needed, and notes about each job. He's never owned a smartphone or bothered with computer scheduling. Some things work just fine the old way. The Victorian mansion sits back from the road, partially hidden behind old live oaks draped with Spanish moss. Tom's truck crunches over the gravel driveway, tires following decades-old ruts that speak of countless visitors who've come and gone. The house bears its age with quiet dignity: weathered white paint, detailed trim work that would cost a fortune to replicate today, and a wraparound porch that's seen generations of Sunday afternoons. Margaret Whittaker stands on that porch now, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing a simple floral dress that somehow manages to look elegant. She has the kind of presence that makes you want to stand a little straighter, though her warm smile puts you at ease just as quickly. "I hope I'm not troubling you too much," she says, her voice carrying the gentle lilt of old Texas money, though Tom doesn't recognize it as such just yet. That leak's been getting worse with every storm. Tom follows her inside through a foyer, where sunlight streams through leaded glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across hardwood floors that have been polished by time rather than pretense. The house smells of lemon furniture polish and fresh-baked cookies, but underneath lies the deeper scent of history, old books, well-oiled wood, and memories. "My late husband always said we should modernize," Margaret comments, leading him up the stairs, "but somehow we never got around to it. Some places deserve to keep their character, don't you think?" Tom notices the photographs lining the stairway. A wall, black and white images of cattle drives and oil derricks mix with color photos of vast rangelands. In one, a younger Margaret stands beside a distinguished-looking man in front of what appears to be a ranch house, though its size suggests mansion might be more accurate. He doesn't recognize it as the headquarters of the largest ranch in Texas. Not yet. The attic is a time capsule of its own, filled with steamer trunks and furniture draped in sheets that stir like ghosts in the draft from the leak. Tom spots the problem immediately. A section of flashing has worked loose, letting water seep in around an old chimney. "Nothing too serious," he assures her, already mentally cataloguing the materials he has in his truck. "I can have this fixed up before supper time." "Oh, would you? The other fellows who came out made it sound like I'd need to take out a mortgage to fix it." She laughs softly, and Tom misses the irony in her words. The repair itself takes less time than Tom expected. He works methodically, replacing damaged shingles and securing the flashing properly this time. The summer heat bears down, but he's used to it. From the roof, he can see for miles rolling hills dotted with live oaks, distant pastures where cattle might graze. The property seems to stretch beyond his line of sight, though he assumes it's just neighboring lands. When he climbs back down, Margaret has a pitcher of sweet tea waiting on the porch, condensation beading on the crystal glasses that have probably seen a century of similar afternoons. "You must sit for a spell," she insists. "No one leaves this porch without taking tea, especially not someone who's done me such a kindness." They sit in rocking chairs that have smoothed their own grooves into the porch boards. Margaret shares stories about the house, about growing up in Texas when it was a different world. She's a good listener too, asking Tom about his work, his family, the town he's known all his life. There's something in the way she weighs his words, considering them carefully, that he'll remember later. "My husband always said you can tell everything you need to know about a person by how they approach their work," she remarks, watching a hummingbird dart among her hanging fuchsias. He believed in the value of doing things right, even when no one was watching. As the afternoon light softens, Tom refuses her attempt to pay him. "Just keep me in mind if anything else needs fixing," he says, gathering his tools. He doesn't notice how her eyes follow him thoughtfully as he walks to his truck, doesn't see her pick up the phone as soon as he's gone. The next time he sees Margaret Whittaker, she'll be stepping out of a black SUV in front of his house, about to change his life. But for now, he drives home content, thinking only of a job well done and the pleasant company of an elderly widow who reminded him somehow of the grace his own mother once showed to strangers. The morning sun hasn't yet burned through the fog when Tom spots the convoy of vehicles turning onto his street. 3 black SUVs and a Mercedes sedan, their polished surfaces out of place among the weathered pickup trucks and modest sedans of his neighborhood. They move with quiet purpose, like a small parade of wealth gliding through a working-class dream. Tom's coffee cup pauses halfway to his lips as they pull up in front of his house. He's standing on his porch, still in his work. Clothes from an early morning repair job when Margaret Whittaker steps out of the Mercedes. She's dressed more formally today, a tailored blazer and silk scarf that speak of board meetings rather than afternoon tea on the porch. "Good morning, Tom," she says warmly, as if arriving with an entourage of dark-suited men is the most natural thing in the world. "I hope we're not interrupting your day too early." Before Tom can respond, one of the men opens a leather portfolio and hands Margaret a set of documents. The morning light catches the gold emblem on the cover, Whitaker Ranch. Holdings Limited. "I wasn't entirely forthcoming with you the other day," Margaret begins, her tone gentle but direct. "The leak you fixed, that was at my townhouse, but my real home," she pauses, watching Tom's face carefully, "is a bit more extensive." She hands him a glossy photograph, recently taken from the air. It shows a sprawling ranch complex that stretches to the horizon. Modern buildings mixed with historic structures, all carefully maintained. Vast pastures sectioned by miles of fencing, dotted with thousands of cattle. Roads thread through the property like arteries, connecting various operations centers, worker housing, and what appears to be a private airstrip. "The Whitaker Ranch," she says quietly, "has been in my family for 4 generations. It's the largest working ranch in America, though we try not to advertise that fact too broadly. These days, we run cattle on just over 825,000 acres. Tom stares at the photo, his weathered hands trembling slightly. He's heard of the Whitaker Ranch, of course. Everyone in Texas has. But he'd always thought of it as something distant, almost mythical, like the King Ranch or the great spreads of legend. "What you did the other day," Margaret continues, settling into one of Tom's porch chairs as if they were just having another afternoon chat. "Fixing that roof without hesitation, without trying to inflate the price. That meant something to me. It reminded me of how my late husband Richard would have handled things." One of the men places a folder in front of Tom. Inside are photographs of various buildings across the ranch. Bunkhouses needing repair, historic structures requiring restoration, equipment, sheds that have seen better days. "We have a full maintenance crew, of course," Margaret explains, "but what we need is someone to oversee it all, someone who understands the value of doing things right, who can treat this land and its heritage with the respect it deserves." She leans forward slightly. "Someone like you, Tom." The morning sun has burned through the fog now, casting long shadows across Tom's small front yard. In the distance, a neighbor's dog barks, and the familiar sound of a school bus rumbles down the street. His world feels suddenly surreal, as if he's watching it all through rippled glass. "I'm offering you the position of estate manager," Margaret says. "Full responsibility for maintaining and preserving not just the buildings, but the legacy of 4 generations. The salary is substantial, and it comes with a house on the property." She smiles softly. "A much bigger workshop, too." Tom looks down at his father's toolbox, sitting by the porch steps where he'd left it earlier. The painted letters, "Miller and Son," catch the morning light. He thinks about his father's words about fixing things right, about treating folks right. "It's a big change," Margaret acknowledges, reading his expression. "But Tom, sometimes life hands us chances to do exactly what we're meant to do, just on a larger scale. My husband used to say that true craftsmanship isn't about the size of the job, it's about the size of the care you put into it." The morning breeze carries the scent of Mrs. Garcia's roses from next door, a familiar comfort in this moment of extraordinary possibility. Tom looks at the photograph again, at the vastness of it all, and feels something shift in his chest. Not fear exactly, but the weight of potential, of purpose expanding beyond the boundaries he's known. That evening, after Margaret and her entourage have gone, Tom sits in his father's old leather chair, surrounded by the comfortable shadows of his childhood home. The manila folder containing Margaret's offer rests on the coffee table beside. A yellowed envelope he hasn't opened in years. His mother's last letter, written when she knew her time was growing short. The house feels different tonight, as if its familiar walls are holding their breath, waiting. Through the window he can See Mrs. Garcia's porch light click on next door, the same way it has every evening for 30 years. The predictable rhythm of his world suddenly feels both precious and somehow insufficient. Tom reaches for his mother's letter with hands that have fixed countless broken things, but never quite managed to repair the hollow space her passing left behind. The paper is soft with age, his mother's elegant handwriting faded but still clear. My dearest Tom, there will come moments in your life when the path ahead seems too big, too uncertain. Remember what your father always said, a man's worth isn't measured by the size of his house, but by the size of his heart. You've got such a big heart, my boy. Don't let fear of change keep you from using it to its fullest. Whatever you choose in life, choose it because it lets you be who you truly are. Your father and I never wanted you to stay in this house out of obligation. We wanted you to stay because it was where you could do the most good, be the most you. If the day comes when you find a bigger purpose calling, know that you carry our love and our blessing with you. Sometimes the best way to honor the past is to bravely step into the future. All my love, Mom. Tom wipes his eyes with the back of his hand, remembering how his father would spend evenings in this same chair, planning out the next day's jobs in his worn notebook. Every job deserves your best, he'd say, whether it's fixing $1 million mansion or Widow Johnson's screen door. The phone starts ringing. Word travels fast in small towns, and everyone wants to know about the mysterious cars that visited Tom Miller's house this morning. He lets it ring. Instead, he walks to his workshop, breathing in the familiar scents of wood shavings and machine oil. His grandfather's level hangs on the wall, its brass still gleaming. Tom remembers the old man's words. A tool's just a tool, boy. It's the hands that hold it, and the heart that guides those hands, that matter. He runs his fingers along the level's edge, thinking about Margaret's words about preservation and legacy. On his workbench sits tomorrow's job list. Fix the Henderson sisters' gate, replace old Pete's broken window pane. Look at the church's wobbly pulpit. Good work, honest work. But now he imagines different jobs, restoring century-old ranch buildings, preserving pieces of Texas history, teaching younger workers the proper way to care for things built to last. The decision weighs on him like a physical thing. This house holds every memory of his parents, his father teaching him to measure twice and cut once, his mother's Sunday dinners with their door open to anyone who needed a meal and company. But maybe those memories, those lessons, aren't bound to these walls. Maybe they're meant to go with him, to guide him toward something bigger. A car passes outside, headlights sweeping across his workshop walls. They illuminate his father's old sign, leaning in the corner. Miller and Son, we fix what's broken. Tom stares at it for a long moment, understanding finally that some callings don't change, even when their scope does. Maybe fixing what's broken can mean more than loose shingles and squeaky doors. Maybe sometimes it means helping preserve something larger than yourself, something built by generations of careful hands. He picks up his phone, scrolls to Margaret's number. Before he can second-guess himself, he presses call. As it rings, he looks around his workshop one last time, seeing it not as something he's leaving behind, but as the foundation for whatever comes next. Dawn spreads across the Whitaker Ranch like watercolor on canvas, painting the Texas sky in shades of amber and rose. Tom stands on the porch of his new home, a renovated foreman's house with a wraparound veranda and a view that stretches to the horizon. His father's toolbox sits beside him, looking almost small against the vastness of the landscape. The ranch manager's badge feels heavy in his pocket. Margaret had presented it to him yesterday, a simple silver shield with Whitaker, Ranch Estate Manager, engraved above his name. This was Richard's idea, she'd said softly. He believed every person who carried responsibility for this land should wear a reminder of that trust. A knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. Pete Martinez, the head of maintenance, stands there with a thermos of coffee and an expression that mixes politeness with careful assessment. At 65, Pete has spent 4 decades keeping the Whitaker Ranch running, and Tom can read the unspoken question in his eyes. What can this small-town handyman possibly know about managing 800,000 acres? Thought you might want to start with a tour, Pete says, pouring coffee into 2 ceramic mugs. Best to understand what you're getting into before the real work begins. They take Pete's truck, a weathered ranch vehicle that's seen its share of hard miles. As they drive, Pete points out buildings and operations centers, each with its own history and challenges. The main barn complex spans nearly an acre, its century-old timbers still straight and true. Equipment sheds house millions of dollars worth of machinery. Bunkhouses dot the property, home to the dozens of workers who keep the ranch operating. Previous manager wanted to tear down some of the older structures, Pete mentions, watching. Tom's reaction from the corner of his eye said it wasn't cost-effective to maintain them. Mrs. Whitaker wouldn't hear of it, but we're running out of people who know how to work with buildings this old. Tom steps out at one of the original bunkhouses, running his hand along the hand-hewn cedar posts. Yellow cedar, he says, almost to himself. They knew what they were doing back then. This wood's naturally resistant to rot and insects. Properly maintained, it'll last another 100 years. Something in Pete's expression shifts slightly. That's exactly what Mr. Whitaker used to say, he notes, his tone warming a fraction. They spend the morning meeting the maintenance crew, 15 men and women who eye Tom with a mixture of curiosity and reservation. He recognizes the look. It's the same one he's worn himself when faced with change he didn't ask for. In the main workshop, larger than his entire former house, Tom notices worn tools alongside state-of-the-art equipment. He picks up a hand plane, tests its edge with his thumb. Good steel, he says, just needs proper sharpening. Nobody uses those anymore, one of the younger workers comments. We've got power tools for everything now. Tom smiles, remembering his father's words. Power tools are fine for some jobs, he says, but there are times when the old ways are still the best ways. Sometimes the wood tells you what it needs if you take the time to listen. By afternoon, they've covered maybe a quarter of the ranch. Tom's notebook is filled with observations, repairs needed, systems to be updated, skills to be taught. But he's also noting the strengths, Pete's encyclopedic knowledge of the property, the crew's obvious pride in their work, the solid bones of buildings that have weathered a century of Texas summers. Margaret finds him at sunset, studying blueprints of the original ranch buildings in his new office. "How was your first day?" she asks, settling into a leather chair that still holds the shape of her late husband's presence. "Overwhelming," Tom admits, "but in a good way. There's so much history here, so much worth preserving." He gestures to the blueprints. These builders, they weren't just putting up structures, they were building something to last generations. Margaret nods, something like approval warming her eyes. That's exactly what Richard used to say. He believed this ranch wasn't just about cattle or land. It was about maintaining a piece of Texas history, about doing things the right way, even when the easy way was more tempting. As darkness settles over the ranch, Tom stands again on his porch. Lights twinkle across the property, workers' homes, security lamps, the distant glow of the main house. The evening air carries the scent of mesquite and possibility. In his pocket, the ranch manager's badge has begun to feel a little less heavy, a little more like it belongs. The old ranch ledgers spread across Tom's desk tell a story in columns of faded ink and careful annotations. 3 weeks into his new role, he's spent evenings studying these records, trying to understand the ranch's rhythms through the neat handwriting of managers past. Richard Whitaker's entries stand out, detailed notes about repairs, materials used, and most importantly, the people who did the work. "You're still here?" Pete's voice startles him. The maintenance chief stands in the doorway, holding a stack of work orders. "It's past 8. Just trying to get my bearings," Tom replies, gesturing to a ledger from 1985. "Mr. Whitaker had a system for everything. Look at this. He tracked not just what needed fixing, but who was best suited for each." Job. He knew his people. Pete's expression softened slightly. Richard believed in matching skills to tasks, said a ranch this size runs on relationships as much as repairs. He pauses, then adds reluctantly, "The crew's not happy about the new maintenance schedules." Tom nods, having expected this conversation. His first major change, implementing preventive maintenance routines instead of just fixing things when they break, hasn't been well received. The younger workers complain it's unnecessary work. The older ones resist changing methods they've used for decades. "Show me what you got there," Tom says, clearing space on his desk for Pete's work orders. As they review the papers, Tom notices something. These equipment shed repairs. Kyle's been handling them. "For the past 5 years, Pete confirms defensively. "And he's good with the newer machinery, right? But look at these repair frequencies." Tom pulls out his notebook, where he's been tracking patterns. "We're replacing the same parts every 3 months. That's not normal wear and tear." Pete studies the numbers, his forehead creasing. "Kyle's fast, efficient, but maybe speed isn't everything." Tom interrupts gently. "Remember that hand plane in the workshop? Sometimes the old ways take longer but last better." He pulls out another ledger from 1992. "See here? When Mr. Whitaker had Bobby Carson maintaining that same equipment, repairs were annual, not quarterly. Bobby retired 2 years ago," Pete says slowly. "He was slower than Kyle, but he understood the machinery. Knew when something wasn't. Quite right before it broke." Tom leans back in his chair. "Is Bobby still in the area?" A week later, Bobby Carson stands in the equipment shed, his weathered hands moving over the machinery with the familiarity of an old friend. Kyle watches skeptically as the older man explains the subtle sounds and vibrations that signal developing. "Problems. It's like reading Braille," Bobby says, guiding Kyle's hand along a bearing housing. "Feel that? Little bit of play there means you've got maybe 2 weeks before real trouble starts. Fix it now. You save yourself a bigger headache later," Tom observes from the doorway, noting how Kyle's expression shifts from skepticism to interest. It reminds him of himself at Kyle's age, learning patience from his father. The resistance doesn't disappear overnight. Change comes slowly to places with deep roots, but as weeks pass, Tom notices small shifts. Kyle starts keeping his own maintenance journal, recording the things Bobby teaches him. Other workers begin bringing their expertise forward, stories of how things were done in the past, mixing with suggestions for the future. One evening, as sunset paints the ranch in gold, Tom finds Margaret on the main house porch. She's watching a crew repair the historic barn's roof, using traditional methods Tom insisted on instead of modern shortcuts. "It's taking longer," she observes. "Yes," Tom admits, "but it'll last longer too, and the younger crew members are learning. Skills they can pass on." Margaret smiles, a knowing look in her eyes. "Richard used to say that running this ranch was like conducting an orchestra, every person playing their part, but someone needs to hear the whole music." She turns to Tom. "You're beginning to hear it, aren't you?" Tom thinks about Kyle teaching another worker what Bobby taught him, about Pete's grudging approval when a preventive repair headed off a major breakdown, about the quiet pride in the crew's faces when they complete a job the right way. "I'm learning," he says simply, watching the last light fade from the Texas sky. In his pocket, the ranch manager's badge has become familiar, its weight a reminder not just of responsibility, but of possibility. The letter arrives on heavy cream-colored stationery, the Blackstone Ranch logo embossed in dark blue at the top. Tom finds it on his desk one morning, alongside a sticky note in Margaret's elegant handwriting. "We should talk about this. M." Inside, the message is both courteous and calculating. The Blackstone Ranch, their largest competitor, offers to buy the Whitaker's maintenance division outright. Equipment, contracts, and staff. The number at the bottom has more zeros than Tom's ever seen on a check. He finds Margaret in her study, where morning light streams through tall windows onto walls lined with ranch photographs spanning 4 generations. She's looking at one showing her late husband standing proudly with the maintenance crew after restoring the main barn. Third offer this month, she says without turning around. Blake Blackstone's been circling since Richard passed. He thinks our traditional methods are inefficient, outdated, wants to modernize everything, streamline operations. She speaks the word streamline like it's something distasteful. What do you think? Tom asks, settling into one of the leather chairs. Beside her desk, I think Blake sees dollar signs where Richard saw legacy. Margaret finally turns to face him. The Blackstones run their ranch like a corporation. Everything's about quarterly profits and shareholder returns. They've already bought out 3 smaller ranches, gutted their historic buildings, replaced everything with prefab structures. Tom thinks about Kyle, now proudly teaching other workers the maintenance wisdom Bobby Carson passed down. About Pete, finally warming to the blend of old and new methods. About buildings that have stood for a century, their bones still strong because generations of workers cared enough to maintain them properly. They're hosting a regional ranchers conference next week, Margaret continues. Blake's giving a presentation on modern ranch management in the digital age. We've been invited, of course. Her tone suggests it's less an invitation than a challenge. The conference room at the Golden Prairie Hotel feels more like a corporate boardroom than anything belonging to a ranch. Blake Blackstone commands attention from the podium, his custom suit and polished presentation speaking of spreadsheets rather than saddles. The future of ranching isn't in preserving the past, he declares, gesturing to slides showing sleek, modern buildings and automated systems. It's in efficiency, standardization, and economies of scale. Tom sits beside Margaret, aware of other ranchers watching them. The Whitaker Ranch is the last major holdout against Blackstone's vision of modernization. He studies the photos of Blackstone's new buildings, all metal and glass, identical structures that could be anywhere, belonging nowhere. During the break, Blake approaches their table, his smile as practiced as his handshake. Margaret, always a pleasure, and you must be Tom Miller. Heard good things about your maintenance program. His tone suggests otherwise, though I have to wonder if all that custom work and traditional craftsmanship is really sustainable in today's market. Before Margaret can respond, Tom speaks up. Sustainability isn't just about quarterly returns, Mr. Blackstone. It's about buildings that last generations instead of decades. About skills passed down because they work, not because they're new. Blake's smile doesn't waver. Noble sentiments, but sentiment doesn't pay the bills. Why maintain historic structures when you can replace them with modern, low-maintenance alternatives? Why keep an oversized maintenance crew when outsourcing is more cost-effective? Because some things are worth more than money, Tom replies quietly. Like knowledge that can't be found in manuals. Pride in work that stands the test of time. A sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. Later, driving back to the ranch through the gathering dusk, Margaret breaks a long silence. You reminded me of Richard just then. He never saw this place as just a business either. Tom watches the familiar buildings emerge from the darkness, their shapes solid and reassuring against the star-filled Texas sky. Light spills from the workshop where the evening crew is finishing up. Through the open doors, he can see Kyle demonstrating proper tool maintenance to 2 new workers. His gestures echoing Bobby Carson's patient teachings. Blake Blackstone's not wrong about everything, Tom admits. We can't ignore modern methods entirely, but we can choose which changes to embrace and which traditions to preserve. Margaret nods, understanding in her eyes. That's exactly what this place needs. Someone who can bridge past and future, who sees value in both. She smiles. I think Richard would have liked your answer today. The ranch manager's badge catches the last light as Tom steps out of the car. Its weight reminds him now not just of responsibility, but of something more precious. The trust of people who believe that doing things right matters more than doing them cheap or fast. The workshop plans spread across Tom's kitchen table tell a story of evolution. 6 months into his role at the Whitaker Ranch, he's finally ready to implement the vision that's been taking shape in his mind. The drawings show an expanded training facility where old craftsmanship meets modern necessity, a place to preserve skills that are becoming as rare as the historic buildings they maintain. "You've thought this through," Sarah Coleman says, studying the plans with an architect's practiced eye. As the ranch's property developer, she's been instrumental in helping Tom navigate the balance between preservation and progress. Her presence in his kitchen, sharing coffee and professional insights at 9 in the evening, has become increasingly common over the past few months. "Bobby Carson helped me design the teaching spaces," Tom explains, conscious of how Sarah's subtle perfume mingles with the scent of coffee and old blueprints. He knows what worked when he was learning, what would have made it easier to pass on his knowledge. Sarah tucks a strand of silver-streaked dark hair behind her ear, a gesture Tom has come to recognize as her thinking pose. At 53, she carries herself with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of proving herself in a male-dominated field. "The layout's practical," she notes, "but have you considered adding more natural light? Those clear-story windows you suggested for the Peterson barn renovation worked beautifully." Their hands brush as they both reach to adjust the drawing, and Tom feels the same quiet spark he's been noticing more frequently lately. Neither of them acknowledges it directly. They're both too experienced in life to rush into anything, too wise to mistake professional chemistry for something more without careful consideration. "Margaret's going to love this," Sarah says, stepping back from the plans. She's been worried about losing traditional skills as the older workers retire. This could be the answer. Tom nods, remembering his conversation with Margaret earlier. That day, they'd walked the property together, discussing how the ranch had changed since he'd taken over maintenance operations. The crew's efficiency had improved, but not at the cost of quality. Younger workers were learning from their older colleagues, understanding why some tasks couldn't be rushed. "It's not just about maintaining buildings anymore," he'd told Margaret. "It's about maintaining knowledge, passing down understanding that you can't get from a manual or a YouTube video." Now, watching Sarah make notes on his drawings, Tom realizes how much his own understanding has grown. The ranch manager's badge in his pocket no longer feels like a borrowed identity. His father's lessons about doing things right have found new meaning on this larger stage. "You're different," Sarah observes suddenly, her green eyes meeting his with characteristic directness. "From when you first arrived, I mean. More comfortable," Tom suggests. "Confident," she corrects. "Like you've found where you belong." The moment stretches between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Through the kitchen window, the ranch's nighttime sounds create a familiar symphony. Distant cattle, the evening breeze through old oak trees, the comfortable creaking of buildings, settling into darkness. "I should go," Sarah says finally, gathering her papers. "Early meeting tomorrow with the Historical Society about the bunkhouse renovations." But she lingers at the door, as if waiting for something neither of them is quite ready to name. "Thanks for looking these over," Tom says, holding the door. "Your insight's always valuable." "Always happy to provide it," she replies, with a small smile that suggests she might be talking about more than just professional advice. After she leaves, Tom sits on his porch, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. He thinks about his journey from small-town handyman to estate manager, about how fixing what's broken sometimes means more than just repairs. Sometimes it means building something new while honoring what came before. The workshop plans on his table represent more than just a building project. They're a bridge between past and future. Just like the tentative warmth growing between him and Sarah feels like a bridge between his solitary past and whatever tomorrow might bring. His father's voice echoes in his memory, sometimes the strongest. "Repairs are the ones you take time to think through," Tom smiles, knowing the wisdom applies to more than just construction. At his age, he understands that the best relationships, like the best restoration work, can't be rushed. They need proper Foundation, careful attention, and the wisdom to know when to move forward and when to let things settle. The weather-worn map in Tom's office becomes the center of their world when the storm warnings begin. Margaret stands beside him, her finger tracing the path of the approaching system across their vast acreage. The National Weather Service is predicting the worst Texas storm in decades, a slow-moving behemoth that threatens to dump 15 inches of rain in 24 hours. The creek that runs behind the historic structures, Tom says, pointing to the blue line snaking through the property. If it floods like in '87, he trails off, studying Richard Whittaker's careful annotations about past flood levels and drainage patterns. Richard always said that map would save the ranch someday, Margaret remarks quietly. He spent years marking every drainage point, every vulnerable area. Her voice carries both pride and concern. Sarah enters the office bringing fresh satellite imagery. The storm's intensifying, she reports, her professional demeanor not quite hiding her worry. We've got maybe 8 hours before it hits. Tom straightens, years of handling emergencies kicking in. Pete, he calls to the maintenance chief hovering in the doorway. Get the crews moving on sandbag stations. Start with the historic barn and work outward according to the elevation marks on Richard's map. The next hours blur into a symphony of purposeful chaos. Tom coordinates from his office, dispatching teams with the precision of a battlefield commander. The radio crackles constantly with updates and requests. Young Kyle, once skeptical of old methods, now works alongside Bobby Carson, their combined knowledge proving invaluable as they secure buildings using techniques passed down through generations of ranch hands. Sarah stays close, her architectural expertise helping identify structural vulnerabilities. Their shoulders brush occasionally as they lean over plans and maps, but there's no time to acknowledge the growing warmth between them. Some things must wait for calmer weather. The storm hits at midnight with biblical fury. Rain hammers the wrench like nails driving into tin. Wind howls through the century-old oak trees, and lightning transforms the Texas night into stuttering day. Tom stands on his porch, watching crews battle nature with sandbags and determination. Southeast barriers holding. Pete's voice crackles over the radio. But the creek's rising faster than '87. Tom studies Richard's map, its margins filled with notes about water flow and pressure points. There, in faded ink, a crucial detail catches his eye. Pete, there's a secondary drainage channel behind the old Morton place. Richard's notes say it saved the lower pasture in '54. That channel's been closed up for decades, Pete argues. Then we open it, Tom decides. Get Bobby and Kyle out there with the excavator. They'll know how to do it without compromising the main structures. Margaret appears beside him, rain dripping from her raincoat. Richard would be proud, she says simply. You're reading the land the way he did. Through the darkness, they hear the distant growl of heavy machinery. Bobby Carson, despite his retirement, sits in the excavator cab, guiding Kyle's work with the wisdom of experience. Together, they race against the rising water to recreate a solution from 70 years ago. The night seems endless. Every hour brings new challenges, a blocked culvert threatening the workshop, support beams groaning in the historic barn, the access road washing out. But with each crisis, Tom finds answers in the combination of Richard's careful planning and his own experience keeping things whole. Sarah coordinates with emergency services, her calm voice a counterpoint to the storm's rage. When she passes Tom coffee sometime in the endless dark hours, their fingers meet briefly, conveying strength and something deeper that doesn't need words. Dawn breaks with exhausted glory over a ranch transformed. The creek runs high but contained, thanks to the reopened drainage channel. Buildings stand secure, their foundations protected by sandbags and sweat. The historic structures, cradled in the wisdom of past and present, remain untouched by the floodwaters. Tom walks the property with Margaret and Sarah as the sun climbs higher, assessing damage and counting blessings. Workers nod as they pass, respect evident in their tired eyes. Even Pete manages a gruff, "Good call on that drainage channel, boss." Near the old barn, they find Bobby teaching a group of younger workers how to check for water damage using traditional methods. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," he says, echoing Tom's words from months ago. "Water leaves signs if you know how to read them." "We didn't just save buildings last night," Margaret observes, watching the impromptu lesson. "We proved that preserving the past isn't about refusing to change. It's about building on what works, about knowing which foundations can support new growth." Tom feels the weight of his ranch manager's badge, now caked with dried mud. It no longer feels like a symbol of authority, but of connection to the land, to its history, and to the people who keep it alive. Sarah's hand finds his, briefly, a quiet acknowledgement of shared victory and possibilities yet to come. The storm has left its mark on the ranch, but not the one it intended. Instead of destruction, it has revealed the strength that comes from bridging old and new, from trusting both experience and innovation. As the Texas sun burns away the storm clouds, Tom realizes that sometimes the biggest challenges don't break things. They prove what's already unbreakable. In Margaret's study, the old family Bible rests on a leather-topped desk, its pages yellowed with age but carefully preserved. A week after the storm, she invites Tom and Sarah to join her for evening coffee, though something in her tone suggests this is more than a casual social call. "Richard and I never had children," Margaret begins, her fingers tracing the generations of Whitakers recorded in the Bible's front pages. "It wasn't by choice, just one of those things life decides for." "You?" She pauses, pouring coffee into delicate cups that have survived their own century of family gatherings. "But we always believed family isn't just about blood." Through the window, the setting sun paints the ranch in amber light. Workers are still repairing minor storm damage, their distant figures moving with purpose across the landscape. Tom notices how Sarah automatically catalogues the repairs needed for her reports, her professional instincts never quite at rest. "The storm got me thinking," Margaret continues, opening the Bible to where a collection of photographs serves as bookmarks. "About legacy, about what we choose to preserve." She hands Tom a faded photograph, a young couple standing proud before a much smaller ranch house. "That's Richard's grandparents, Thomas and Eleanor Whitaker. They built this place with nothing but determination and trust in each other." The next photo shows a young Margaret and Richard, perhaps in their 30s, surrounded by ranch hands. 1985, Margaret explains, "the year of the drought. We nearly lost everything." Her voice softens with memory. "But the crew stuck with us, worked for half wages, some for no wages at all, said the ranch was their home too." Sarah leans forward, her shoulder brushing Tom's as she studies the photographs. "That's Bobby Carson, isn't it, in the back row?" "Fresh out of the army then," Margaret nods. "Richard saw something in him, the same way he'd have seen something in you, Tom." She turns another page, revealing more recent photos. "Richard believed this ranch wasn't just about land or cattle. It was about building something that mattered, creating a place where people could belong." Tom thinks about his own journey, from fixing Widow Johnson's screen door to managing an estate larger than some towns. About how Sarah's expertise and quiet strength have become as essential to him as his father's old toolbox. About how the ranch has given him not just purpose, but community. "The night of the storm," Margaret says, "watching you all work together, seeing Bobby teaching the younger crew, hearing Sarah coordinate with emergency services. Richard would have loved it. Not the crisis itself, but how everyone came together, how all the pieces we've tried to preserve proved their worth." She pulls out one final photograph, Richard in his later years, sitting on the porch with Margaret, their faces lined with age, but bright with contentment. "We never had children," she repeats, "but we built a family all the same." Every person who's put their heart into this ranch, who's understood what we're trying to preserve here, they're all part of it. Tom feels Sarah's hand find his, a gesture so natural it seems to have been waiting to happen. Margaret notices but doesn't comment, her smile saying everything necessary. When Richard died, she continues, people expected me to sell. Blake. Blackstone probably had the contracts drafted before the funeral was over. But Richard and I had already decided the ranch would go to someone who understood its heart, not just its balance sheet. The evening light has softened to purple, the first stars appearing over the ranch. Through the open window comes the familiar symphony of night sounds, cattle lowing in distant pastures, trucks heading home after the day's work, screen doors closing as families gather for dinner in ranch houses that have sheltered generations. I've been watching, Margaret says simply. How you lead without demanding, Tom. How you honor the old ways while embracing the new. How you and Sarah work together, bringing different strengths to the same purpose. She closes the Bible gently. Richard would have approved of all of it. The weight of her words settles in the room like an inheritance. Tom thinks about his own parents, about how they taught him that doing things right meant more than just proper technique. Sarah's hand tightens on his, grounding him in the present, while his thoughts bridge past and future. Family, Margaret says, looking out over her ranch, is about choosing to belong to something bigger than yourself, about building something worth preserving and preserving something worth building. She smiles at them both. Richard understood that. I think you do too. The partnership agreement sits unopened on Margaret's desk, its crisp legal pages waiting like a held breath. Outside, autumn paints the ranch in golds and russets, marking almost a year since Tom first fixed a leak in a widow's roof, not knowing how that simple act of kindness would change his life. Before you open it, Margaret says, settling into Richard's old leather chair, I want to tell you a story. She gestures for Tom to sit. Sarah, invited at Margaret's specific request, takes the chair beside him. When Richard's grandfather first acquired this land, he made a promise, not just to build a successful ranch, but to create something that would last, something that would matter. Through the study windows, they can see Bobby Carson with 3 young apprentices, teaching them the art of maintaining the historic. Barnes' hand-hewn beams. The morning sun catches the silver in Bobby's hair, the eager attention in his students' faces. Richard and I spent 40 years keeping that promise, Margaret continues. Not just maintaining buildings and land, but maintaining values. Creating a place where doing things right matters more than doing them quickly or cheaply. She pauses, watching a hawk circle lazily over the autumn-touched pastures. But we always knew the hardest part would be ensuring it continued after us. Tom feels Sarah's presence beside him, steady and supportive. Over the past months, their relationship has deepened with the natural patience of mature hearts, each understanding that the best bonds, like the best buildings, need proper time to settle. Margaret opens her desk drawer and removes a photograph Tom hasn't seen before. It shows Richard in his later years, standing with a much younger Tom's father outside a modest house. Your father did some work for us years ago, she explains. Richard never forgot how he insisted on doing the job right, even when we suggested quicker alternatives. He said then, that man understands what matters. Tom stares at the photograph, memories of his father's lessons about craftsmanship and integrity taking on new meaning. I never knew. Richard kept track of you over the years, Margaret says softly, through friends in town, through people whose homes you'd repaired. When I needed my roof fixed, it wasn't entirely coincidence that you were the one who noticed. The weight of this revelation settles in the room like evening dust catching sunset light. Sarah's hand finds Tom's, a gesture that's become as natural as breathing. The partnership agreement, Margaret continues, finally opening the document, is more than just a legal arrangement. It's an invitation to continue what Richard's grandfather started, to preserve not just buildings and land, but principles, values, a way of life. Tom reads the first page slowly, his eyes widening. The agreement would make him full partner in the Whitaker Ranch, with eventual succession rights to the entire operation. Margaret, this is what Richard would have Wanted, she finishes firmly, what I want. You've proven yourself not just capable of running this ranch, but of understanding its heart. She looks at Sarah. Both of you have. Your combined skills, Tom's practical wisdom and craftsmanship, Sarah's architectural expertise and vision. For preservation, they're exactly what this place needs for its next chapter. Through the open window comes the sound of Kyle's voice, confidently explaining to a new worker the importance of proper maintenance schedules. Tom remembers the skeptical young man who once questioned the value of traditional methods, now grown into a leader in his own right. I'm not getting any younger, Margaret says with practical frankness, and Blake Blackstone's offers keep getting more aggressive. The ranch needs someone who'll stand firm, who understands that its value isn't just in its acreage or cattle count, but in its soul. Sarah speaks for the first time, her professional assessment mixing with personal warmth. The Historical Society's latest review praised the ranch's commitment to preserving traditional structures while adapting to modern needs. They specifically mentioned Tom's training program for young craftsmen. Margaret nods approvingly. That's exactly the balance we need, honoring the past while building the future. She pushes the agreement forward. Take time to think about it, both of you. This decision affects your futures too, the life you're building together. Tom looks at the document, feeling the weight of history and possibility in its pages. He thinks about his father's lessons on doing things right, about Richard's legacy of preservation, about the trust Margaret's offering, about Sarah beside him, their shared vision for what the ranch could be. Outside, the Texas sun gilds the autumn landscape, throwing long shadows from buildings that have sheltered generations. In the distance, Bobby's apprentices practice their craft, ensuring skills honed over centuries will survive in young hands. The ranch spreads out like a living thing, its breath the collective effort of all who call it home. The anonymous letter arrives on a Tuesday morning, its expensive paper carrying words sharp as barbed wire. Tom finds it propped against his office door, the morning sun throwing shadows across its unmarked envelope. Inside, the message is clear. The Whitaker Ranch needs more than a handyman playing cowboys and Indians. Some traditions shouldn't be broken. He's reading it for the third time when Sarah enters, her face tight with concern. You've got one too? She holds up her own letter. Different paper, but similar sentiment. Historic preservation doesn't mean preserving incompetence. Your support of this farce puts the ranch's future at risk. Pete appears in the doorway, his weathered face darker than usual. Found these posted in the break room. He hands over photocopied documents, old maintenance records, carefully selected to show every minor mishap during Tom's tenure, with costs circled in angry red ink. Someone has scrawled across the top, "Can we afford another year of amateur?" Tom sets the papers aside, his father's voice echoing in his memory. "Son, when people fight dirty, that's when you know you're cleaning something worth cleaning." Through his window, he watches Bobby working with his apprentices, their movements sure and purposeful as they repair the old corral using techniques passed down through generations. "Blake Blackstone's people have been asking questions in town," Sarah says, settling into her usual chair. Her professional demeanor doesn't quite hide her personal concern. "About your background, about our relationship, about Margaret's competence to make succession decisions. They're trying to build a case," Pete growls. "Make it look like Margaret's being taken advantage of by an unqualified handyman and his architect girlfriend." The crude description carries his disgust at the implications. Tom stands, moving to the window. The ranch spreads before him. Buildings he's helped restore, people he's helped train, a legacy he's helped preserve. What does Margaret say? That she expected something like this. Sarah joins him at the window, her shoulder brushing his in quiet support. She's been dealing with corporate vultures since Richard died, but this feels different, more personal. A knock at the door reveals Kyle, looking uncomfortable in clean work clothes. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you should know." He explains how he was approached at the local bar last night, offered a management position at Blackstone Ranch. They said others have already agreed to jump ship, that it's just a matter of time before the ranch is sold. Tom studies the young man who's grown from a skeptic of tradition to one of its strongest defenders. And what did you tell them? Kyle straightens. That they don't understand what we're building here. It's not just about maintaining buildings, it's about maintaining something that matters. His words echo Margaret's own, proof that some lessons run deeper than profit margins. Later that afternoon, Tom finds Bobby Carson sitting on the workshop porch, carefully oiling an antique level. Heard about the letters, the older man says without looking up. Reminds me of '85, during the drought. Vultures circled then, too, thinking they could pick the ranch apart when it was vulnerable. What happened? Richard Whittaker happened. Bobby tests the level's bubble, adjusting it with practiced fingers. He understood something those corporate types never will. A ranch isn't just land and buildings. It's people. Their skills, their loyalty, their sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. Sarah appears with fresh coffee and decades of professional experience handling corporate pressure. We need to document everything, she says, sitting beside Tom. Every improvement, every training success, every dollar saved by doing things. Right the first time. Show that preserving tradition isn't just about sentiment, it's about sustainable success. Pete joins them, bringing news from town. More workers have been approached with offers. Rumors are spreading about the ranch's financial stability. Questions are being raised about Margaret's judgment. They're not just attacking the ranch. Tom realizes they're attacking its heart, trying to break the connections that make it work. Through the workshop doors, they can see the next generation of craftsmen practicing their skills. Kyle demonstrates a traditional joinery technique to two new workers, his movements confident, his understanding deep. In the distance, the historic barn stands proud against the Texas sky, its restored timbers a testament to the value of doing. And things right? So what do we do? Pete asks, voicing the question they're all considering. Tom fingers his ranch manager's badge, remembering how its weight has changed from burden to belonging. We do what this ranch has always done, he says, quietly. We stand together, we build something worth preserving, and we preserve something worth building. The crisis management plan lies open on Tom's desk, its pages filled with Richard Whittaker's meticulous preparations for every imaginable emergency. But nothing in those carefully typed scenarios covers what to do when the threat comes from within. 4 more resignations this morning, Pete reports, his voice tight with anger. All from the newer crew members. They're offering signing bonuses now and spreading rumors that the partnership agreement's illegal, that Margaret's not competent to make succession decisions. Through the window, Tom watches a group of Blackstone's lawyers leaving the county records office, their expensive suits out of place against the small-town backdrop. Sarah's been there all morning, defending their documentation of historic preservation grants and property improvements. They're building a case for conservatorship, Margaret says from the doorway, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. Claiming I'm being manipulated, that the ranch needs professional management to protect its assets. She settles into her chair with the dignity of generations behind her. Blake Blackstone scheduled a shareholders meeting. He's gathered enough proxy votes to force the issue. Tom feels the weight of his ranch manager's badge, remembering the simple days of fixing Widow Johnson's screen door. But when he looks at Margaret, at the quiet strength in her eyes, he knows those simpler days were just preparation for this moment. Get everyone together, he says quietly. All the old hands, all the crew chiefs, anyone who understands what we're really fighting for. An hour later, the main barn fills with the ranch's heart and soul. Bobby Carson sits with his apprentices, their faces showing the worry they're trying to hide. Kyle stands near the back, still oil-stained from maintaining equipment that corporate efficiency reports would have replaced months ago. Sarah arrives last, her professional armor slightly dented, but her spirit unbowed. They think we're just stubborn old-timers, Tom begins, looking at the faces before him. refusing to change, clinging to outdated methods. He picks up a piece of timber from Bobby's teaching collection. This beam was cut and shaped by hand, probably before any of us were born. It's held up through storms that flattened modern structures, not because it's old, but because someone took the time to do it right. He moves through the crowd, letting each person handle the beam. Feel those tool marks. Each one tells a story of someone who cared enough to make something last. That's not inefficiency, that's investment. In quality, in future, in people. Sarah steps forward, spreading out her preservation reports. Our traditional maintenance methods have reduced replacement costs by 60% compared to industry standards. Our apprenticeship program has created skilled workers, while other ranches struggle with turnover. We're not just preserving buildings, we're preserving knowledge that saves money and lives. But it's more than that, Margaret adds, her voice carrying the weight of history. This ranch isn't just land and buildings, it's people, community, a way of life that understands some things can't be measured in quarterly reports. Kyle speaks up from the back. When I started here, I thought all this tradition stuff was just holding us back. But now I see, we're not just maintaining a ranch, we're maintaining something that matters. Something worth fighting for. The barn fills with murmurs of agreement, with stories of what the ranch means to each person there. Tom listens, seeing in their faces the same thing Margaret must have seen in his, that day he fixed her roof. People who understand that doing things right matters more than doing them fast or cheap. The shareholders' meeting is next week, Margaret announces. Blake Blackstone will have his lawyers, his efficiency reports, his proxy votes, but we have something he doesn't understand, something he can't buy. We have each other. Sarah finishes quietly, her hand finding Tom's. Pete stands, his weathered face determined. So what's the plan, boss? Tom looks at the crisis management folder, at Richard's careful preparations. Then he looks at the people before him. Craftsmen, teachers, learners, family. We show them what this ranch really is. Not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but living proof that some traditions are worth preserving because they work. Bobby Carson nods slowly. Like my daddy used to say, the best way to prove a fence is strong is to let people lean on it. As the meeting breaks up, people lingering to share stories and solidarity, Tom feels something shift in the atmosphere. The worry hasn't disappeared, but it's been replaced by something stronger, determination, purpose, the kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing you're standing for something that matters. Margaret touches his arm as she leaves. Richard would be proud, she says simply, not just of what you're doing, but of how you're doing it. Outside, the Texas sun sets on buildings that have weathered countless storms, on people who understand that the strongest structures are built on foundations of shared values and common purpose. Tomorrow will bring its challenges, but tonight, watching Sarah organize their defense with the same care she brings to preserving historic buildings, Tom knows they're ready. The new ranch logo catches the morning light, freshly painted on the restored barn doors, a simple design that bridges past and present. The traditional Whitaker brand now intertwines with symbols of craftsmanship, a plumb bob, a level, a square. Beneath it, the words "built to last" speak to more than just construction. 3 days before the shareholders' meeting, the ranch hums with purposeful energy. Tom stands with Sarah on the main house porch, watching teams of workers demonstrate what Margaret calls living preservation. They've turned the challenge into an opportunity, making the ranch itself their evidence. Bobby's group is ready, Sarah says, checking her tablet. She's transformed the preservation documentation into a powerful narrative, backing sentiment with hard data. The Historical Society's representatives arrive in an hour. Wait until you see what Kyle's prepared. In the restored workshop, Bobby Carson and his apprentices have set up stations showing traditional crafting techniques alongside modern methods. Young workers demonstrate how centuries-old skills save time and money when properly applied. Their Pride is palpable as they explain their work to visiting architects and preservation experts. "See this joint?" Kyle tells a group of impressed inspectors, showing a restored beam. "Traditional mortise and tenon, but we've added modern monitoring sensors. Combines the strength of old methods with new technology for maintenance tracking. Saves us thousands in prevention versus repair." Tom remembers the skeptical young man who once questioned these outdated techniques. Now Kyle leads the ranch's innovation program, finding ways to enhance traditional methods with modern tools. His presentation on cost savings and efficiency improvements lies ready for the shareholders' meeting, backed by 2 years of solid data. In the main barn, Pete oversees the final touches on what they're calling the Legacy Exhibition. Photographs trace the ranch's history, but with a twist, each historic image paired with its modern counterpart, showing how traditional methods have been adapted rather than abandoned. Margaret's idea, Sarah explains, straightening a frame, showing that preservation doesn't mean being frozen in time. It means building on strong foundations. The transformation extends beyond buildings. Workers who once divided into old school and new school camps now move seamlessly between traditional skills and modern technologies. The maintenance crew's average age spans 5 decades, each generation learning from and teaching the others. Tom finds Margaret in her study, reviewing documents for the shareholders' meeting. The family Bible sits open on her desk, but beside it lies a tablet displaying real-time ranch operations data. "Finding the balance," she says, following his gaze. "That's what Richard always said was the real challenge." Outside, a young apprentice learns to judge wood quality by sound and touch, while his colleague updates the digital inventory system they've developed. The scene symbolizes everything they've worked to achieve: respect for traditional knowledge enhanced by modern efficiency, not replaced by it. Sarah joins them, carrying architectural plans that show the ranch's evolution. "The preservation. A board's assessment just came in," she announces, her professional composure barely containing her satisfaction. "They're recommending the Whitaker Ranch as a model for sustainable historical preservation in the modern ranching industry." "Blake Blackstone's people won't care about preservation awards," Margaret notes, but her eyes shine with pride. "No," Tom agrees, "but they'll care about the operating costs." He pulls out Kyle's report showing how their integrated approach has reduced maintenance expenses while increasing property values. "And they'll care about this." He hands Margaret the latest industry analysis, where 3 major ranching operations have begun adopting Whitaker Ranch's apprenticeship program model. The afternoon sun streams through windows that have witnessed a century of ranch life, falling on the merged symbols of past and present. A laptop's soft whir mingles with the ancient creak of wooden floors. Outside, the sound of skilled hands working with traditional tools mixes with the beep of modern testing equipment. "You've done more than preserve buildings," Margaret says, quietly. "You've shown how to preserve what matters." While moving forward, Richard would have loved seeing this. Tom touches his ranch manager's badge, remembering the simple act of fixing a leaking roof that led him here. Sarah's hand finds his, their shared understanding deeper than words. Together, they've helped transform the ranch into something that even Blake Blackstone's accountants will have to acknowledge, a place where tradition and innovation strengthen each other. As evening approaches, workers gather spontaneously on the main house porch, sharing stories that span generations. Bobby Carson's apprentices demonstrate their skills to visiting experts, their young faces bright with the same pride that shines in their teachers' eyes. The ranch breathes with unified purpose, ready to face whatever the shareholders' meeting may bring. 2 contracts lie on the polished mahogany table in the Whitaker Ranch conference room. One bears the Blackstone corporate logo, promising modernization and efficiency. The other is the partnership agreement Margaret prepared, its pages holding a different kind of promise. Between them sits the future of everything they've built. Blake Blackstone commands attention from the head of the table, his presentation slick with corporate polish. The numbers don't lie, he tells the assembled shareholders, gesturing to charts showing industry trends. Traditional ranching operations are becoming obsolete. The Whitaker Ranch needs more than sentimental attachment to outdated methods. Tom sits between Margaret and Sarah, feeling the weight of generations in the room. The shareholders, mostly distant relatives and old family friends, avoid meeting Margaret's eyes. They've seen too many historic ranches fall to corporate buyouts. Too many family legacies transformed into profit centers. Our analysis shows significant inefficiencies, Blackstone continues, his confidence practiced and smooth. The maintenance department alone is overstaffed by industry standards. The apprenticeship program, while admirable, diverts resources from core operations, and the insistence on traditional construction methods, if I may, Sarah interrupts, her professional demeanor matching Blackstone's polish. She rises, spreading out her own documentation. Those traditional methods you're criticizing, they've reduced our maintenance costs by 60% compared to industry averages. Our apprenticeship program has eliminated recruitment costs and created a workforce with unprecedented skill levels. She hands out reports from the Historical Preservation Board, architectural assessments, and operational analyses. The Whitaker Ranch isn't just preserving buildings, it's preserving knowledge that translates directly to operational efficiency. Kyle steps forward, no longer the skeptical young man who once questioned tradition. 2 years ago, I thought like you, Mr. Blackstone. Thought newer always meant better. He pulls up maintenance records on the conference room screen. Then, I learned why these traditional methods survived. They work. Look at the data. Emergency repairs down 80%. Structure longevity extended by decades. Worker retention at record levels. Blackstone's smile tightens. Charming anecdotes, but business decisions require more than sentiment. The proxy votes might interest you to know, Pete interrupts from the back, that 3 of your showcase properties just hired our apprenticeship graduates. Seems they couldn't match our maintenance efficiency with their modern methods. Bobby. Garson stands slowly, his weathered hands steady on a piece of historic timber. This beam's been holding up the main barn since 1892. Your modern replacements, lucky to last 30 years. That's not sentiment, Mr. Blackstone. That's economics. Margaret rises, her dignity silencing the room. When my husband's grandfather started this ranch, he understood something vital. A ranch isn't just land and buildings, it's knowledge, passed down, skills, preserved and improved, people growing together. She looks at each shareholder in turn. What Tom and Sarah have built here isn't about clinging to the past. It's about building on it, making it stronger. Tom thinks about his journey from fixing Widow Johnson's screen door to managing this vast operation. About Sarah's vision for preserving not just structures, but wisdom. About Kyle learning from Bobby, then teaching others, creating a chain of knowledge stretching forward and back. The choice before us, he says quietly, standing beside Margaret, isn't between old and new. It's between quick profits and lasting value, between treating this ranch as a commodity or as a legacy worth preserving. He spreads out his own documentation, maintenance logs showing problems solved, costs saved, innovations born from traditional wisdom. Every number in Mr. Blackstone's presentation is accurate, he acknowledges, but they measure the wrong things. They count costs, but not value. Equipment, but not expertise. Buildings, but not the knowledge that keeps them standing. Sarah joins them, her professional expertise reinforcing their practical experience. The Whitaker Ranch isn't successful despite its traditional methods. It's successful because it knows which traditions matter, which innovations help, and how to combine them wisely. Through the conference room windows, they can see Bobby's apprentices demonstrating preservation techniques to visiting industry experts. Kyle's maintenance team moves between historic buildings and modern equipment with equal skill. The ranch breathes with unified purpose, every aspect proving their words true. Blackstone tries one last time. The proxy votes have changed, announces Howard Whittaker, Margaret's elderly cousin and a major shareholder. Some of us needed to see for ourselves what was really happening here. He looks at Tom and Sarah with approval. I've cancelled my proxy to Blackstone. So have others. The room stirs with murmurs of agreement. Margaret's hand finds Tom's, squeezing gently. Sarah's shoulder brushes his other side, their shared vision proving stronger than corporate pressure. Blackstone gathers his papers, corporate smoothness cracking slightly. You're choosing sentiment over sense, he warns. No, Margaret corrects. Quietly. We're choosing wisdom over expedience, value over price, the future over the quick profit. She looks around at her ranch's defenders. Tom's practical leadership, Sarah's professional expertise, Kyle's innovative spirit, Bobby's deep knowledge, Pete's steady presence. We're choosing to preserve something worth preserving and build something worth building. The legacy document rests in the ranch's vault beside the original deed, its fresh signatures binding past to future. A month after the shareholders' meeting, Tom stands in Margaret's study, watching the winter sunset paint the ranch in hues of amber and gold. The partnership agreement, now officially recorded, feels less like a business transaction and more like a family inheritance. Richard always said the hardest part of running this ranch wasn't the work itself, Margaret observes, arranging a collection of photographs on her desk. It was making sure the right things survived. She picks up an image of her late husband, teaching a young ranch hand the proper way to check foundation stones. Not just buildings and methods, but understanding, values. Sarah enters with the latest Preservation Society report, her professional pride softened by personal satisfaction. The historical board is using us as a case study in sustainable ranching practices. 3 more corporate operations have requested our apprenticeship program guidelines. Through the window, they watch Kyle leading a training session in the workshop. Bobby Carson sits nearby, his experienced eyes watching as young hands learn old skills enhanced by new technology. The scene embodies everything they fought to preserve and everything they're building toward. Blake Blackstone called yesterday, Margaret mentions, her tone carrying a hint of amusement. Wanted to know if we'd consider consulting for his operations. Seems their maintenance costs are running higher than projected. Tom thinks about his journey from small-town handyman to ranch partner. About Sarah's vision for preserving not just structures, but heritage. About how fixing a widow's leaking roof led to protecting something far larger than himself. We've had 17 applications for the apprenticeship program this month, Pete reports, joining them with his daily update. Words getting around. About our integrated approach. Young folks wanting to learn the old ways, older hands interested in our technology integration. The ranch has found its rhythm in this blend of traditional wisdom and modern innovation. In the main barn, centuries-old joinery techniques are documented with digital precision. Historic buildings wear subtle sensors that help predict maintenance needs. Young workers learn to judge wood quality by touch and sound while updating. Cloud-based inventory systems. Tomorrow's paper is running a feature, Sarah adds, showing them the advanced copy. They're calling it the Whittaker Way. How one ranch is bridging past and future. The subtitle mentions a handyman who saw value in doing things right. Tom feels his face warm, but Margaret's hand on his arm carries approval. That's what Richard saw in you, even before I did. Someone who understood that the right way isn't always the quick way or the cheap way. Outside, the winter light fades to purple, security lights clicking on across the vast property. Each illuminated building represents a victory. Not just over corporate takeover attempts, but over the idea that progress means abandoning tradition. The evening brings an impromptu gathering on the main house porch, a tradition that's strengthened during their months of challenge. Bobby's apprentices demonstrate their latest project, a historic window restoration that incorporates modern weather sealing techniques. Kyle explains their updated maintenance tracking system, which blends traditional inspection methods with predictive analytics. "I had an interesting visitor today," Pete mentions as coffee makes its rounds. Former manager from one of Blackstone's properties said their standardized approach isn't working like they promised. Wanted to know our secret. Sarah smiles, her hand finding Tom's. "What did you tell him?" "Told him what Tom's been saying all along. There aren't any shortcuts to doing things right." Margaret watches her ranch family with quiet satisfaction. The partnership agreement has secured the property's future, but more importantly, it's secured its soul. The next generation of workers will know not just how to maintain buildings, but why their methods matter. "Richard used to worry," she says, softly, "about whether anyone would understand what we were trying to preserve here, not just the buildings and the land, but the spirit of the place. The understanding that some things are worth doing right, worth keeping right." Tom thinks about his father's old toolbox, still holding pride of place in his office, about Sarah's brilliant integration of preservation principles with modern needs, about Kyle's journey from skeptic to teacher, Bobby's wisdom living on in young hands, Pete's steady guidance supporting them all. "We're not just preserving the past," he realizes aloud. "We're showing how it strengthens the future." As darkness settles over the ranch, lights twinkle across the vast property like earthbound stars. Each one represents people working, learning, building something larger than themselves. In the distance, the historic barn stands proud against the night sky, its restored timbers sheltering both ancient wisdom and new possibilities. The legacy document in the vault isn't just paper and ink. It's a bridge between what was and what will be, a promise to keep building on the foundations laid by generations before, to keep fixing what's broken, preserving what matters, and teaching others why it all means something more than profit margins can measure. The new family photo hangs in Margaret's study, taken on Tom and Sarah's wedding day 6 months ago. It shows not just the happy couple, but the entire ranch family gathered on the main house porch, Margaret beaming like a proud mother, Bobby Carson standing tall despite his cane, Kyle and his apprentices arranged in their Sunday best, Pete trying to hide his smile and failing. 1 year after the shareholders' meeting that decided the ranch's fate, Tom stands in his office, Richard's old office, watching spring sunshine spill across the property. The morning dew catches light on new growth and old buildings alike, each structure standing as testament to the bridge they've built between past and future. "The National Historic Preservation Society just confirmed," Sarah says, entering with her tablet and a cup of coffee. Her architect's precision now carries the warmth of belonging. They're featuring the Whitaker Ranch in their annual publication, a model of living heritage, they're calling it. Through the window, they watch Bobby Carson teaching his newest group of apprentices. The training program has grown, now accepting students from ranches across 3 states. Kyle oversees the technical integration, showing young hands how to use modern tools while understanding traditional methods. Blake Blackstone's ranch manager called again, Sarah continues, settling into what has become her usual spot near Tom's desk. Their maintenance costs are still running higher than ours. Even with all their modern equipment, they're finally ready to try our integrated approach. Tom smiles, remembering his own journey from fixing Widow Johnson's screen door to managing this vast operation. Maybe we should send Kyle to consult, show them how blending old and new works better than replacing either. The morning brings its usual rhythm of activity. Pete coordinates work crews with the efficiency of long practice, each team moving between historic structures and modern operations with practiced ease. The ranch has found its balance, proving that preservation and progress can strengthen each other. Margaret joins them later, carrying a letter that makes her eyes bright with emotion. The Texas Historical Commission wants to establish a craft heritage program here, teaching traditional building methods to maintenance crews from other historic properties. She looks out at the ranch that has been her home for over 40 years. Richard always said the real value of this place wasn't in its size, but in what it could teach others. The main barn hosts a demonstration for visiting ranch managers, Kyle showing how their integrated maintenance system has reduced costs while extending building life. Bobby's apprentices demonstrate traditional wood joining techniques, their young faces proud as they explain why these methods endure. Remember when Kyle thought all this tradition was just holding us back? Sarah muses, her hand finding Tom's. The simple gold band on her finger catches the morning light. Now he's teaching others why it matters. Their wedding had been a ranch affair, held on the main house porch, where Tom first learned the truth about Margaret's identity. The historic barn hosted the reception, its restored timbers witnessing the union of not just two people, but two approaches to preserving what matters. Sarah's professional expertise and Tom's practical wisdom combining to make something stronger than either alone. Pete appears with the morning reports, his gruff manner softened by satisfaction. Got word from that corporate ranch in Oklahoma. Their new maintenance team, the ones who trained here last month, just saved them $500,000 in replacement costs. Used our methods to restore instead of replace. Tom thinks about the partnership. Agreement in the vault, about how it represents more than just legal succession. It's a promise to keep building on the foundations laid by those who came before, to keep teaching others why doing things right matters more than doing them quick or cheap. Had visitors at the workshop yesterday, Bobby mentions, easing into a chair with the dignity of age. Young folks from that technical college in Dallas, they came wanting to learn about modern ranch operations, left wanting to learn traditional craftsmanship instead. His weathered face creases with pride, said watching our people work made them realize what they'd been missing. The ranch spreads out before them, each building and field telling its own story of preservation and progress. The historic structures stand proud alongside modern operations, neither diminishing the other. Workers move between past and present with easy grace, carrying forward the knowledge of generations while embracing the innovations that make their work better, not just faster. Margaret watches a young apprentice demonstrate proper wood aging techniques to a group of corporate managers, their skepticism fading as they see the practical results. "You've done more than preserve buildings," she tells Tom and Sarah. "You've preserved understanding, showed others why it matters." As morning stretches toward noon, the ranch breathes with purposeful life. Bobby's lessons echo from the workshop. Kyle's innovations streamline ancient tasks without losing their essence. And Pete's crews maintain the delicate balance between honoring tradition and embracing progress. Tom holds Sarah's hand, feeling the weight of his ranch manager's badge, now a symbol of belonging rather than authority. From fixing a widow's leaking roof to protecting a legacy, his journey has taught him that the strongest foundations are built on understanding why things matter, not just how to fix them. The Texas sun rises high over the Whitaker Ranch, gilding buildings that have sheltered generations and will shelter generations more, thanks to hands that remember the old ways while welcoming the new. In Margaret's study, the family photo catches the light, showing faces united by more than work, united by the understanding that some things are worth preserving, some traditions worth keeping, some values worth passing on.